This episode of Artists I Love features the great landscape artist Edgar Alwin Payne. Payne was born March 1st, 1883. According to the U.S. Census of 1900, Payne resided with his parents, 2 sisters, and 5 brothers in Prairie Grove, Washington County, Arkansas. His Alabama-born father was employed as a carpenter. Edgar's occupation was listed as carpenter apprentice. Leaving home on several occasions, Payne painted houses, signs, portraits, murals, and local theater stage sets to pay his way. Traveling through the Ozarks, then around the Southeast and Midwest, he finally wound up in Chicago and enrolled to study portrait art at the Art Institute of Chicago. He remained only 2 weeks at the Institute, finding it too structured. He preferred instead to be self-taught, relying on practice and his own sense of direction. Struggling at first, he soon exhibited a group of landscape works, painted on a small easel at the Palette and Chisel Club. During this period, he also obtained the occasional mural work to supplement his income. Payne made his way to California for the first time in 1909 at the age of 26. He spent several months painting at Laguna Beach, then headed to San Francisco. In San Francisco, he met other artists, including commercial artist L.Z. Palmer. He returned to California for a second time in 1911. When he returned to Illinois that fall, he found that L.Z. had taken a job as a commercial artist in Chicago. This cemented their already growing interest in each other. On the morning of their wedding day, about a year later, November the 9th, 1912, Edgar noticed that the light was perfect and had L.Z. postpone the ceremony until the afternoon. Luckily, the artist in her offered some understanding. As a couple, they became well known in Chicago's art circle. L.Z. helped Edgar with his mural work, and soon he had an exhibition at the Art Institute of Chicago. Arguably, their greatest collaborative effort happened in 1914 with the arrival of their daughter, Evelyn. Between 1915 and 1918 to 1919, Edgar maintained a professional address in Chicago at the Tree Studio building on East Ohio Street. The following spring, they took Evelyn to see her maternal grandparents in San Francisco. They also attended the Panama Pacific International Exposition. The following year, Edgar made his first trip to the Sierra Nevada mountains. This trip was a big moment in his life, and Payne would return again and again to paint the unspoiled Sierra. These paintings remain one of the hallmarks of his work. He earned his first major commission in 1917. In a bid to attract tourism, the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad asked him to paint the Southwest along the railroad's trek from Albuquerque to California. This commission not only solidified his reputation as an artist, it also forever linked him to Western America. Although he painted in Europe, he is most remembered for his work from the Four Corners area of the Navajo Nation Reservation, Yosemite, and the California coast. That year, he and L.Z. spent 4 months painting, exploring, and taking in Cañon de Chile. This area, from Taos, New Mexico, to the Grand Canyon, became one of Payne's 2 main inspirations for the next 20 years. The Santa Fe Railroad commissions were the turn-of-the-century brainchild of William H. Simpson, chief of the railway's advertising department. Starting in 1892 with Thomas Moran, Simpson exchanged travel on the train along with lodging at railroad hotels and meals at railroad restaurants, and sometimes even cash for paintings, photographs, pottery, and jewelry. This endeavor lasted for decades and made the Santa Fe one of the largest collectors of the southwestern fine art. When the Santa Fe Commission expired, the couple returned to San Francisco. Edgar received a commission from the Congress Hotel in Chicago for a mural on 11,000 square yards of muslin. The mural was to cover several floors of the hallways of the hotel. Payne rented a warehouse in Glendale, California, and hired other artists, including Elsie, to help complete the work. In 1918, Edgar and Elsie made their home and studio in Laguna Beach. He helped organize the Laguna Beach Art Association and became its first president. They spent the next 4 years painting their way through the Southwest in places like Canadian Rockies in British Columbia and Alberta, Canada, and then exhibiting in the Los Angeles area. Sometimes their trips would involve hiking into the backcountry, looking for undisturbed places of raw and rare beauty to paint, sometimes for weeks. Edgar exhibited extensively in California, including such important venues as the Californian Art Club, Californian State Fair, Cano and Chaffin Galleries, and Stendhal Galleries. The Paynes spent part of the summer of 1921 at the California Art Colony by Carmel by the Sea, where Edgar exhibited his work at the 15th annual exhibition at the local Arts and Crafts Club. After finding success during this period, the trio took a 2-year painting tour of Europe from 1922 to 1924. Painting in Brittany, Paris, Provence, Switzerland, and Venice. His favorite place in Europe was the Alps, where he painted the Great White Peak of Mont Blanc, which the Paris Salon gave an honorable mention in spring 1923. The Great White Peak is reputed to be in the collection of Newport Harbor High School in Newport Beach, California. This painting and others formed a collection of annual acquisitions at an art show sponsored to acquaint high school students with styles of painting and art. The collection was forgotten and distributed to various offices and the school district. Its existence was rediscovered by school librarian John McGinnis, who tracked down and restored all 56 of the missing paintings. The collection is now known as the Ruth Stover Fleming Collection. Upon returning to the U.S. in the fall of 1924, the Paynes first stayed in Chicago, then went back to Laguna Beach, and then to New York City in 1926. Always on the go, they painted in Arizona, California, the California Sierras, Connecticut, New Mexico, New York, and Utah. They spent the summers crossing the country, painting as they went. They returned to Europe to paint the harbors of Brittany in 1928. The following summer, they painted Lake Louise, Alberta. After the financial collapse of 1929 and the subsequent Great Depression, commissions didn't come as easily, so the Paynes returned to Southern California on a more permanent basis, purchasing a new Los Angeles studio home in 1932. During this time, Evelyn would marry, and Edgar and Elsie would become separated that same year. Edgar moved to Hollywood to a small studio home on Soward Street. However, he would spend a great deal of his time in California's Sierra Nevada mountains, painting his favorite subject. Payne's lifelong obsession with the Sierras would lead him to produce a documentary film, Sierra Journey. In 1941, he wrote Composition of Outdoor Painting, a comprehensive book on composition and composition forms. The book also explains landscape painting techniques, color, repetition, rhythm, and value. The 7th edition printing of the work was completed in 2005. After a 14-year separation, Elsie returned to help Edgar in 1946 upon learning that he had cancer. She stayed with him until he died, April the 8th, 1947. There is a bronze relief sculpture of Edgar at the Laguna Beach Art Museum, done by Elsie in 1952. She championed his work until her own health and degradation of eyesight caused her to stop in 1959. She moved in with Evelyn and her husband in 1969 in Minneapolis. Elsie died peacefully June 17, 1971. You can find works of Payne's that are of Italian harbors, the Alps, landscapes of Laguna, but Edgar Alwin Payne is most remembered for his work of American Indians, of the Four Corners area, and, of course, the paintings of his beloved Sierras. In the Sierras, high up in Humphreys Basin, you will find the lake named for him, Payne Lake. Payne's work was an influence on Bill Ray, John Deckert, and many other great artists.